We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Welcome back to Round Table. We're here with Stephen of the Round Table community. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing good. Thank you for the invitation to the Round Table, man.
Welcome back. I mean, last time you were here, we had a different location, and it was a fun time. We had a lot to talk about. We got into a lot.
Yeah, it definitely was. I appreciate that. Was my first time on the show, and got to meet some new people and see some perspectives of different people. So I appreciate it, man, and I'm glad I'm back.
Hey, I'm glad you came on, and actually that's going to lead us into what we're going to talk about today. We actually got multiple topics we're going to get into, and again, just shout out to our Roundtable fans. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We're going to get into you've been on a cannabis tour, and we're going to talk about some of the places you've been to, and get into what went on, and kind of get a feel of what's the pulse of other places outside of Texas on cannabis. We're planning to get into Texas issuing a medical license, its first for marijuana, and kind of break that down in relation to the recent non-decision, I guess you can say, with the special session. We didn't really get anywhere with marijuana. They just kind of let it get stuck in traffic. And then we plan to get into some sports talk later on. I know you're pretty hot about first off, we're glad that it's football season finally.
All right. Thank God for football.
And it's I'm glad, and we're going to definitely discuss predictions, and I definitely want to hear what yours are. I didn't know that you're a Broncos fan, and I look forward to us playing you week 2.
Oh yeah, week 2. Broncos, Cowboys.
But we're going to get into also Michael Bennett. He got into an altercation, an incident apparently in Las Vegas that resulted in him being assaulted and temporarily in jail. So I definitely want to get your take on that one. We'll also talk about first off, what is Roger Goodell going to do? We just need to start naming names,
right? And
then we'll also get into the contradictory appeal decision for Ezekiel Elliott. And I mean, I don't get it. Like they wanted. It's like they wanted both sides to lose in this scenario. Right. With the appeal. Obviously, he followed protocol in issuing out the 6-game suspension. I'm not at all speaking, up for Ezekiel Elliott if he committed domestic violence. I haven't read the paperwork. If he did it, then he deserves the maximum punishment. And I think they really ought to, look into how quickly we can get rid of him once his contract is up. This is only his 2nd season.
Right.
But we'll get into that, and we'll also get into Ray Lewis on Colin Kaepernick. After the little pic that you saw before we started of his girlfriend, Nessa, I believe is her name, or at least on Twitter, that's the name. She posted him with Steve Buscemi and then posted a pic with, the scene from Django with, Leo's character.
Stevie.
Samuel.
Get over here, Stevie.
And so I think people there's mixed opinions on that situation because he claims that he was trying to help Colin Kaepernick. He said that he could raise his hand and attest that I have a job for you, even though they haven't really confirmed. They didn't really want to confirm that they were considering him anyway. Until this happened, they now really just got the scapegoat, in my opinion, to just kind of back away from him and say, well, he did this to himself. But we'll get into it. You know what I mean? And like I said before, we're glad to have you back on, and it's always fun talking with you, Stephen. And with that, I'm just going to let you take it away on your cannabis tour, starting with Denver.
Well, I go back to Denver. That's my hometown. So shout out to the Mile High City, Denver, Colorado, 5280. It's in the house. So that's my hometown. So I always go home and check on family, friends, get to see my old stomping grounds. But with Denver being one of the first states to fully commit to the marijuana industry, I go back for education. I go back to learn. I've made a pretty good network of people. It's exciting to see. It's a new industry. I wish everybody could see it. it's something to be seen, especially when you're from there and you've watched the economics of it and you've seen the city change and you see how people have socialized it. Colorado's advanced in that industry. They're already at the social use. In November, there was a victory in that election because Colorado voted in the social use. Senate Bill 300 in Colorado passed the legalization of social use. So now they're already past a lot of the things we in other states are dealing with. So I can just appreciate their progress. I'm not saying everything is working out and worked to the best of its ability, but they're progressive, and that's what I like about Colorado. Then I went to
just to add to that I mean, it doesn't get much more, it can get more progressive, but at some point in time you got to have common sense. Let's
Right.
just change the law.
Right. Yeah. And that is the main point. Yeah. If you want to be completely blatant, yeah, the law should be changed. There's enough data out there to prove that there's less harm with the legalization than harm on the illegalization. We can see that with the data.
Well, and then we also need to be we no longer need to be talking. Are we gonna? Is it morally right for the community to legalize
Right.
or not legalize? We need to be. We've now seen the evidence. If you look at the over half the nation now has reformed their cannabis laws,
Right.
including Texas. So it's now what's better for the community, legalization or decriminalization. Obviously, every state's going to be different. I mean, like I know in terms of, there are some people that feel, you know what, we don't need the federal government's help. Texas can do it ourselves. I want to agree with that. I don't know if you do.
Well, I tend to agree with that. I think they can, but we need to do something. Is my point. As we have, we're all one country. This is one continuous landmass, and this is what I want people to understand. This is the United States of America. So what's good for Coloradans should be good for Texans.
Period.
What's good for Californians? The whole west coast of our country has now legal recreational marijuana.
And I mean, do you find a trend there? Like, is it the West Coast that's more liberal, or is it the East Coast?
Well, from what I've seen, it's both coasts, but in the Northeast, you get up in the Vermont, Maine area. There's quite a few states over in that area that have done some pretty progressive things. But yeah, if I were to generalize this country, yes, the West Coast would definitely be the most progressive in that industry.
And, you know, California really just legalized it. And, I mean, but, you know, there it's kind of been the underground. They've been the base.
Right.
They've been where we're getting a lot of the data from that says we need to legalize or decriminalize. Now the question is with Denver and you know, well, Denver and California, but also Washington. I don't know
Oregon.
Oregon, Portland. What do you, like...
Nevada.
Like, I just kind of wanted you to get into what... Like, are you noticing with the differences or similarities between these conventions? You've only talked about Denver. You're going to get into Portland, which was our next one.
Well, the differences right now, with Colorado laying the groundwork of at least the legal market, they still have some things because they're stuck in what they created in the beginning. So they have some old things that need to be modified now too, because they stuck it out there. They were the first to do it, so they went conservative. But now they're like loosening up the time frame and when you can buy it. Now they're extending their hours because they're seeing that there's not as much harm. Before they were shutting at 7, but that was under the old marijuana laws. So now they're being more progressive and evolving, and that's what I like about those states. They're putting it out there to learn. People have to be in this industry so we can evolve good laws and good rules. The alcohol industry just didn't become this great industry just overnight. Things had to evolve. You got to get it out there. People got to try. We're going to make mistakes, people. That's the beauty of progress, is making mistakes. And that's what I appreciate about all the states that step forward and legalized it in some fashion, because they're at least taking some progressive steps.
Now, you wanted to get into the convention in Portland that you visited.
So Portland hosted the Indo Expo. It was a very good convention. It was a B2B, so business to business. So shout out to all the vendors that I met out there. Had a good time.
Shout out.
But it was Portland. It was my first time being there. So shout out to PDX, all my friends up there that I met. Eugene, Oregon. Elevate. Shout out to Elevate. That's a minority-owned dispensary in Eugene, Oregon. He showed me a lot of love, so I always like to give that credit.
And I just wanted to jump on that again. Minority business owned for cannabis, like that shouldn't seem as. did that seem kind of odd or like it stuck
it's
out
rare.
to you?
Yeah, he was the only one. I mean, he's 24 years old with a dispensary. So shout out to him, to a young entrepreneur that has stepped out there to go against the grain. I represent his paraphernalia because I want to promote minority business, and congratulations to him. But while I was out there, I went to the Indo Expo, had a chance to network and meet some people in the industry and some other people in the industry. And what I found is there's still a lot of work to be done. Technology, safety, because there is medical grade marijuana. There is the recreational side, but this stuff is going to patients, people. And I want you to realize that we have to consider it that way. Most medications are plant-based, and just look at this the same way. It's a plant-based medication. So our cleanliness is as close to godliness as you can get. So people need to learn protocol. There's a lot of processes and procedures. I come from an aerospace background and manufacturing engineering, so I understand that there's due protocol to make sure that there's the safety factors. Because I am a supporter, but I'm a responsible use supporter.
And I think that's what we also, that's where I was really getting to earlier, that we can be everyday people.
Yeah.
That cannabis
We are.
is no longer it should not, I don't know if you agree or the round table agrees, but like it shouldn't be a taboo topic.
No.
Either you're on board or you're going to get on board at some point.
Or you just don't care enough for it one way or another and you just stay out of it. I'm okay with that.
Well, and because we talked about this off camera, I think, and I mean, just again, shout out to our audience. I do believe there are those out there that don't specifically have a problem with the way the laws are now, the guidelines, the way they are now. And I think that's also part of the problem, because if you're going to continue to use the plant but not say anything about the current laws and the current guidelines in place, well, how are you not part of the problem?
Right. Yeah, because continuing the problem, you are the problem when you are going to do it in the secrecy or the privacy of your own home, but not openly and be publicly speak about it. You're actually the cause of the problem, because if more of us that get up and speak about it, we gain the knowledge and more people learn. I take a lot of time out of my life to educate people, because there was a lot of misnomers, there was propaganda around this topic, and it's time to change. If we really want to make America great, it's time for change.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that sounds a little cliche, just only because of who
Right,
it's used with. But I mean,
I had to borrow
agree.
one from him.
Yeah, hey, he's right. You're right. But I mean, like the change. Yeah, I think honestly the change is here. It's just who's going to interpret it. Like I guess the question how you interpret it rather. Are you when you walk past a car and you smell marijuana, are you gonna feel so alarmed where you want to call the police? Or are you just going to kind of, move on and go about your business?
Right.
Depending on your answer, that should determine where you stand on it.
Right.
Because if you're saying, oh, well, I use it, well, then I personally think you're a person that needs to be on the battlefield fighting for it. And the excuse, oh, well, I have to work. Sure, I get it. Your 9 to 5 is important, and that should come first. But don't forget that the people who struggle were also workers at one point.
Right. And still are.
You know what I mean? Some of the homeless people in the streets that may have had a drug problem for or may not have had a drug problem, but were caught up in drugs. This is kind of was their hook.
And to your point, those people that I want to put out a data point. Every state that has some form of marijuana, their drug and opioid addictions have gone down. The data is proving that, and that's a good data point for people to realize that. I'm not saying it's the whole cause of it, but it's an aid to get people off of harmful drugs that are taking their lives, and harmful prescription drugs that people have much easier access than to marijuana, because it's normally in somebody's prescription cabinet is where that starts.
And then, like, I don't know about you, Stephen, but I just always have my suspicion, with prescription drugs, that some of these may not be approved by the FDA, and the VA can sign off on that just because if they've done test trials and it's worked for some of us, then okay, well, let's keep trying. But I mean, the problem with that is you're taking, yes, the opioids are natural, but the way they're processed and manufactured and put into the body, designed to do certain things for the body, ultimately imitating a body in pill form, that's not natural for the body.
Well, what I would like everyone to understand is nothing's ever better than the original. And that's what gave me the realization that marijuana is not the cure to everything, but it's more natural than anything anyone can ever make. We didn't make synthetic oil before we learned about original oil. We had to understand all the chemical compounds of what oil was to make a synthetic. So what we're doing is we're saying whatever higher power you believe in, God or anybody, that we're making something better than what was put here naturally. And I find that hard to believe. Just, and that's just me, but it's just a hard thing for me to say. You can make a synthetic. The FDA is approving pharmaceutical companies to make a synthetic marijuana, but you won't let us have the original.
Exactly. Fake. You'll allow the fake thing, but not the real thing.
And I'll share something else that I didn't add to one of my places because it was more for vacation. But I went to St. Kitts and Nevis. Very historical for African American history, because I learned while I was there that it was one of the first islands settled for slavery. So that was just a data point I'd like for people to know, because it was an experience that I had, and it was embracing point. But what I learned from there is they have the same thing with their pharmaceuticals. They know that there are natural byproducts that the earth provides, their berries and other things that they can use pharmaceutically, but their government would not allow them to use that, but they'll prescribe them synthetics that are similar to what those natural things can do. That was just the extra tidbit I'd like to throw out, because that was a vacation piece.
And you said this was where again?
St. Kitts and Nevis, out in the Caribbean. It's one of the furthest islands out.
I want to also, just a quick shout out, to anybody listening in the Caribbean, or people that have any family in the Caribbean. This Hurricane Irma has carved out a warpath on North America. It looks like, at least from that coast.
Yeah. Our prayers are sent out to you. We're here for you.
And I mean, like I said, shout out to also to our refugees and those struggling through to get through the situation out in Houston with Hurricane Harvey aftermath. Want to shout out to you guys as well. I was at the Teacup seminar with you guys last year. I really would love to go back to Houston to definitely to support and be back down there and show support for all of you guys out there, because everything we're talking about, what we kind of see you guys doing out in Houston. Right. And I mean, it's a shame that such a terrible tragedy had to happen in such a progressive area in Texas. Yeah,
so we stand with you, Houston, and because you were the first county to step up for the cite and release. And that's not the end game, but it's a start. We do have a cite and release program here in Texas, and people should know that it's here, but be cautious that it could still get you a felony. It's not relinquishing you from a felony. Right. It's just you may not have to get in handcuffs and take a ride that day.
You're not done. It's basically you have the speeding ticket, you got to report to court, and you still got to pay them. And if it happens too many times, then okay, we still got to put you in jail.
Correct. So just be mindful of that, because I know some people are getting excited. It is progress, but it's not change, and that's the difference. We got to change some laws and the way they're read, and we interpret them before we truly can make progress.
Absolutely. I wanted to get through you had a convention also at Toronto and at Cali. I wanted you to definitely, before we wrap up on the topic.
I went to Toronto for a LIFT conference, because that's what they call their national conference, and it's a marijuana conference. But I wanted to see how another country handled their marijuana laws and policies and conferences. So I just wanted to get acclimated. I went out there as a little exploration, just to kind of sightsee and do some benchmarking. Found out that they're even more progressive than even the Denvers and the Californias and the Washington, Oregons. They have it in their social life where it's a part of their medical insurance. So they've even taken it a step further that it's been completely socialized. It's decriminalized. You can get it with your health insurance. So to me, that's very progressive, because that means that the right people can get access to it, because there's a lot of people that, without insurance, they won't be able to afford these things. And that's what some of the people in the states here in the United States struggle with. Yes, they can get it, but now can they afford it? So that's another thing that we don't think about, how we write some of these laws.
Kind of ties in healthcare, huh?
Yeah. So you guys, and that's what I want people to realize, that, health is important. Health is wealth. And just because one thing that works for one person may not be the recipe for the other person. And that's why I became an advocate, because who am I to prevent someone from taking their medication?
Absolutely. And your convention in Cali, was it in all at all similar? I feel like Toronto and well, Cali, like they kind of were on the same
Oh yeah,
wavelength.
yeah, very similar. Yeah, Toronto, they were pretty similar, but yeah, very open, very progressive. Like I said, every state had his own idiosyncrasies of its laws and the way you can and how to consume it. But they are working through those things, and I think we here in Texas deserve the same thing.
And as we segue into it, I wanted to give my opinion on the special session. First of all, just the fact that in the regular session that Texas couldn't pass, we had multiple was it at least 10 different bills
Minimum.
trying to reform cannabis law in Texas, and it got chopped down to 2 that ultimately got bottlenecked.
Right. Yeah, they made it to the floor, and then they got killed. And
how dare Texas? Well, no, not how dare Texas. Shame on Texas. Shame on Texas for letting the current drug laws in our state oppress the same demographics that are the ones out there fighting to change the laws. It's not fair to and I know life's not fair, but it's not fair to the veterans. It's not fair to the families who've lost loved ones because of the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you can't blame the struggles of our economy just on there's no jobs. When you throw people on the street, that costs money too. Right. When you throw people in jail and then they end up on the street afterwards, that costs money too, and that affects the economy in ways that I think obviously in Texas they should realize with the prison industrial complex here.
And I would love to segue right into what you said, and that's one thing, because I want to go back to Toronto, and I want not even Toronto, Canada in general, because I've been to Montreal as well, doing some investigative. That's one thing I liked about that country. They don't see the value in putting people in prison and in boxes. There's no money in that. They need people out working and stimulating the economy, because jobs.
And what's interesting? We'll probably not to cut you off. We'll probably get to it later. But something about Canada. They have universal health care out there, socialized medicine. They want to make sure that everybody's taken care of. Even if you have to take pills, you shouldn't have to struggle with the bill. I think this is a background on the area you're talking about.
Right.
That's also helping out with cannabis. They're saying, look, we know this works for a percentage.
Right.
So this is how we're going to show that we are
It's a social issue. If you have a problem with drug overdose or abuse, they get you help. They don't put you in prison. And that's what they've understood. Yeah, it's a much smaller country than the United States. Maybe they have like 36 million people. They need people working to boost their economy. And we have people, all those people that are in prison, those are working bodies that could be stimulating our economy, growing our communities and doing those type of things, but they're in a box. And then we taxpayers, we're paying for those people. So that's the other part of the problem. Not only are they not helping put into the community, we're paying to house them and keep them boxed up. We just watched a video about Jay-Z saying that we are the most institutionalized prison system in the world. But we point the finger at other countries. It's time for change.
And it's so obvious also in our statistics that the demographics of the people who are put in jail. We claim to be for democracy as America, but we look down on the statistics clearly show that law enforcement does look down on the minority population in terms of drugs, in terms of violence and whatnot, and we're the ones making up those prison cells. It's not that poor white people are in jail too, but that's hurting. That hurts from a different angle, because to be a melting pot, you have to accept all cultures, and you have to identify that if we're going to say it's wrong for this person to do it,
it's wrong for everyone.
It's wrong for everyone, or it's right for everyone,
or right for everyone. And you pointed out something, because you know what, the data never lies. That's one thing why I enjoyed getting an engineering degree, because I love math and data. I went to a cannabis investment conference in New York, and again, I learned 3 data points. This data company is collecting data in the cannabis industry, said 78% of black and brown communities are affected negatively with marijuana and criminal offenses, but only 1% of black and brown people are in the industry in any kind of leadership. And I was like, well, then right there you see the disparity. We make up the majority of the negative side and the prison side, but we're an extreme minority on the negative side. And that's what created the advocate in me. I wanted to create a balance. We need to be well represented on both sides. If we're going to be on the criminal side, we for sure need to be on the positive entrepreneurial side.
And while we're on the topic, like I've said it before, in order for us to change the laws on cannabis in Texas, we have to change our perspective on the racial stigma that's attached to it. We need to also remember that it was a federal official, Harry J. Anslinger, saying that marijuana makes white women promiscuous with Hispanics and Negroes. A federal official in the 20s is the one saying this, and his logic is what we're going by. And yet we're at a point where we finally even had a black president who admitted to using cannabis. So at this point, the narrative should have changed a long time ago, right, yeah. Or at least in 2008 when the first black president admitted to using it before he got elected.
Correct. Yeah. This is an age-old problem, and it's time to face it straightforward with conversation and hash out these issues because reefer madness was just propaganda, and it was propaganda against a minority group of people to push you away from this and stigmatize it. We have to reverse that, and we have to do it together as a people. This isn't a black issue, it's a white issue. This is a people issue because whenever that happened, none of us were around, but we can change, and that's what we're here to do, is be a part of those changing.
And it's just, at the end of the day, it is about unity because marijuana does bring people together. We've seen it. I've seen it. I mean, I know you've seen it. We have to accept that when we're unifying, we need to. In other words, the cause of the racial disparity on blacks in jail for drugs as compared to non-blacks or whites or whoever, we're all in the same. So when one of us gets put in jail, it should hurt anyone who's doesn't look like one of us as well, yeah. If we're truly unified. And
there's certain laws in certain states that are set up that way. In a state like Wyoming, right now on their books, for cultivation of marijuana, any amount is a misdemeanor. But possession of 2 to 3 ounces or more is a felony. Well, who normally has it in their pocket, and who has been the cultivators? When you see that,
hustle is real.
It is, and it's time for us to get those real conversations out there. I know those things for a fact. You can look them up yourself. But when somebody criminalizes the carrier over the manufacturer, there's a problem, because if you really have a war on drugs, you cut off the manufacturing and you cut off the problem.
I think people need to understand that the war we're fighting overseas, or the constant threat of war that we're choosing to fight overseas, that this is what it's doing for us. It's putting us in our place by taking a pill every time we have some kind of minor human error that the government or that society can't deem treatable in any other fashion.
Right. Yeah. That is, and I've heard about the war on drugs, and we know that it takes more than the people that have it in their pockets to get it. It has to come from somewhere. It has to be manufactured somewhere. I've never seen an inner city community that has opioids. You seen a poppy plant in the inner city? I never have. So how is it getting there?
But yet the minorities are the one within our country are the ones going to jail for it. We have to be open, and we have to be real that the racism that's attached to this is not just blatant racism. It could also be ignorant racism. People don't truly believe that there are poppy plants and or poppy factories, opioid factories. I mean, not to say that there aren't, but that on every block where someone has gone to jail for having less than an ounce of marijuana, like that area, and ultimately that the context of that situation probably had nothing to do with a bigger narrative like a kingpin. Right. It was ultimately just to put someone in jail.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's where, if you really wanted to crack down on anything, you need to look at the initial supply. I feel the same way about guns. Why are guns leaking in our communities? There's not a single black gun manufacturer. There's not a single black arms manufacturer that's of minority. But yet and still we have a problem with guns in our communities. How are they getting there? Where are we getting them from? And we don't think about that, because if you stop it at the pass, I know if I had a gun manufacturer and there were a lot of guns leaking out in the streets, the police or somebody would show up and ask, like, hey, too many of these guns are on the street, right? Don't you think? Wouldn't you? I mean, where would you go if you were an investigator and you were, all these guns are on the street? Where would be the first place you'd look?
Well, while you were talking about that, I was thinking, okay, the Department of Homeland Security has more guns than the Department of Defense. So if we want to make any kind of argument about who has the most guns, I'm looking at the federal government. Why do y'all have so many guns? What are y'all getting ready for?
Yeah, and our police force, they have tactical equipment. I thought they're to protect and serve.
And then militarized tactics being pushed, subsidized down to local ordinances, which is unnecessary because now you're going to have riot gear being being expanded amongst a community of peaceful protesters at a rally or something.
And to your point, I saw some disheartening pictures around that point. I saw some pictures around from a Black Lives Matter protest or march. The police were in a much different stance than when a Nazi KKK protest was going on. There was more of a protective stance that we're protecting them, they're exercising their rights. But when I saw the Black Lives Matter, it was, you need to stop. The view was different to me. I saw it through two different windows because of the position of where the officers were standing. They were facing that crowd, looking like they're ready for something, militarized, like you said.
Ready to go to war.
Ready to go to war gear. But then when the Nazi KKK rally was going on, their backs were to them, preventing the other protesters from getting to them. And so I don't understand, what side, who are you protecting? Are you protecting everybody or somebody?
Well, the idea is, and I want to, we're having a great round table. This is why I love always bringing Stephen on board. Shout out to Stephen and his followers, you know what I mean? Shout out to the round table. Thanks for watching and listening.
All my Indo Enterprise followers.
Here's my thing. Okay, I want to get into Charlottesville, Virginia for a second. So we've had all of this outcry or this this disposition over Black Lives Matter, over people protesting police brutality. It's not all Black Lives Matter, but even the fact that you're choosing to protest status quo is now being directed as disrespectful. So what was respectful about thousands of, at least hundreds of thousands of white men in, I correct me if I'm wrong on the head count, but a community or a collective of white men marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, holding Confederate flags, waving them. I mean, like, what is respectful about any part of that? You know what I mean? And then when you critique the people who try to protest the memorials, try to protest the flag, it's, oh, well, that's free speech and you should be able to do what you want with what you spent your money on. I mean, okay, but at the end of the day, it's a loser's flag. And this mentality is being accepted and embraced, right. But the anti to this mentality is being pushed off. Right,
and that's you're right, because what people realize, why would any of us want to represent a flag that doesn't represent everybody? We've been asked to accept this as the country as ours, and we have. You and I appreciate your service. I want to represent for all the vets out there, and
out.
all the branches: Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. All you guys, I appreciate all the work you do, especially my brothers out there. I really appreciate you guys. So much love. So thank you for your service. But
a loser's flag, like the thing is, it just doesn't make sense. You're okay with it, and then on top of that, this flag was designed by a white supremacist, but it's not racist.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where people are still getting hung up on, I know a later topic when we get to it, is the kneeling of the flag. We pulled out a whole stanza that was derogatory towards a whole group of people. How can you expect a group of people to pledge to a flag where all you did was remove a stanza that was negatively talking about killing and dismembering them, and then expect us to pledge allegiance. And don't get me wrong, I love America. I'm American through and through. But you have to understand, America, there has to be change in understanding so we can feel the same as American as you.
And I mean, we said it at the beginning. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. The people who wrote that statement were also complicit with slavery, and so we need to also pay attention to the fact that that needs to be called out. That no, even if that's the way things were, what you said on paper is the way it needs to be. Right. How many black people do you know that are getting licenses to open dispensaries?
So I have some data on that. I'm glad you brought that up. As far as I know, it's a very small percentage of dispensary owners in the state of Colorado. One lady, Wanda James, she got a lot of credit because she was one of the first to get in. But I think I've seen a little bit of change because some people are realizing that, well, if it's only a white male dominant industry, then it's not going to have any. It's not going to have any growth because that's one perspective. I'm just calling it what it is. Like I said, I mentioned my friend up in Eugene, Oregon. So we're starting to get going, but we're still behind the ball. In Maryland, they had to reopen the program because their whole compassionate use program was named after a woman. Her mother was black, but not a single license was issued to a black person. So they had to reopen it because the whole reason for the Compassionate Use Act was on this mother. I think she was a city councilman or something. I may be wrong on that. I'm sorry if I misspoke of what her role is, but she was the one that got the program started, and not a single person of color in a heavily populated demographic of African American people, Baltimore. I mean, that's where a lot of people of color are, and I'm sure there's some great businessmen there of color. So they should have been awarded a license. So we still have to cross those barriers that a lot of us, with the felony charges, there are things that were systematic things were put in place to keep us out of the industry.
Cool. As we roll into it, I have it posted here. Texas issues first license for medical marijuana. And so we're finally it's reported from Austin, Texas, KXAN. We're finally at the point where we're ready to experiment. Like that's what this article kind of had me thinking, kind of had the juices going for me, is we're ready to see what it does. We're ready to see how this product or how this specific plant can affect the Texas market, because we have to change our laws to some extent. Yeah. My thing is, as it relates to what we've been going back and forth about, just the other topics in terms of crime, in terms of business, just in terms of social use. Right. Where is our reform at? Like to have a store that offers it, or a company that finally offers it, that's a step in the right direction. But I know that you don't think that's enough.
That's far from enough, because the way I'll give a little background history and lead into your question. All the states that presently came on, the Colorados, California, Washington, Oregons, and those states, new entrepreneurs were born. That's how you boost the economy. You got to grow new entrepreneurs, new millionaires. Get them in underprivileged communities that were underserved. That's how you stimulate the economy. The way we're doing the program here in Texas is they're bringing in 3 people that already know what they're doing. So they're going to have a foothold and have a stakehold here in Texas before anyone else gets a chance to get their recipe down. So how can we ever grow to be the new entrepreneur when there's someone already stronger, faster, and better? They started several years ago. So when you bring people in from other states, now they're getting a jump start on our economy. Because once you
they don't have to pay taxes,
and they walk away with tax, and that's why I try and wake up Texans. Is I'm not saying it's wrong. We want it, but it's the way we're allowing it to go about. That's why Ohio voted it down the first time. It wasn't that they didn't want the program; they didn't want 10 rich guys owning the whole industry. And those are the things we need to get out to the people.
And I wanted to add to that. Is that a dimension that you would want to be pushed into the reform debate for cannabis? Who's controlling the money?
Yeah, definitely. Because if it's not equally distributed, then it's going to be more of the rich getting richer and the poor just are poor.
Wealth redistribution.
Yeah, you have to. If you don't take a new industry and give everybody a fair chance of getting in, you do other things. You stagnate innovation. You stagnate progress because you know what? Some of those people that may not be who they are now, but could be, they bring something to the table. And that's what change is about, bringing diversity. And that's what I've liked about my investigation and my involvement in this industry is there is some form of diversity. We're not all the way there because we've talked about some topics, but it's a lot better than just everyday life.
I agree. The thing is, I'm not convinced. You know, I like that Texas does have DFW to shout out, by the way. I like that we're trying to be progressive. And then I like that the right wing can at least admit, if nothing else, that cannabis should be legal and that this should not be a fight that we need to be tearing each other apart over. Yes, we need to reform the cannabis laws and we need to change this. However, we need to be hitting more checkpoints if I'm gonna be critical, because let's also remember we have veterans out there that are on the streets that are struggling, that can't get apartments because of marijuana possession charges,
right? And can't get jobs, can't get government housing. There's a lot of things that prevents. Just one little thing that you've done, even if you did it in the wrong manner, it shouldn't prevent you from growing. We're supposed to rehabilitate our citizens, not condemn them and cast them away. Because you know what? You're definitely right. We have a lot of veterans, and we always are out there, pray for our veterans, do this for our veterans. But Colorado peeled off $3 million in tax dollars to build a homeless shelter. Think about that, guys. There's a lot of opportunity for growth to support our veterans, create jobs.
And guess where the money was probably coming from?
Marijuana. Marijuana sales. Marijuana tax revenue is stimulating the economy. Ancillary businesses are growing. Food and restaurant industry, they're not complaining.
And I was thinking, it's like the food industry, you know, the food and beverage industry, like have always been complicit with marijuana. They want to get rid of their product.
Right.
Okay, so they need to give it to people who are going to eat it. So when we sell Girl Scout cookies out in California in front of a medical marijuana dispensary, if we did that in Texas,
right? That girl, shout out to that little girl. Hold on, shout out to that young lady. I want to meet her. That's an entrepreneur. She said, I have a product and I have people that need it, and post it up. And at first, the Girl Scouts was going to give her a hard time that they saw how many sales she had. See, people don't realize
they're not going to argue with money is what it is.
They're not. At first, they were about to give that girl some trouble and found out that she sold the most anyone's ever sold at one time. And now they don't have a problem with it. Matter of fact, don't you think they might come out with a brand? What do you think, Girl Scout cookies?
But the food industry, and okay, Taco Bell's already been complicit in saying legalize marijuana, our menu is for stoners. Okay, we know Jack in the Box has the munchie meal. You know what I mean? Like it's no snitch at all. Like the America is, the private sector is waking up. If we're talking about the food and beverage industry, if we're talking about the plants, if we're talking about the agricultural department, when we grow hemp, when we grow marijuana, and we use it outside of its direct action that typical inner city and urban community.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked. We have barely scraped the surface on the benefits of hemp. That's paper products. It's a renewable resource. We don't have to cut down trees that need to grow 100 years. The roots from hemp plants soak up oil spills. We can create fabric, clothing.
Hempcrete.
Yeah, hempcrete. So insulation for homes. It's a whole new industry. We can look at revitalizing our home industry with eco-friendly stuff. Stuff that's biodegradable. So when it has to be disposed of, because everything has a shelf life.
And how much more help in light of what's happening in current news? Okay, we know that hemp can also be transformed into biofuel.
Correct.
So now with this recent little influx that's been going on of gas, of course, gas stations running out of gas or threatening, or what is it, price gouging?
Yeah, price gouging. Yep.
You know, and, well, not all of them are. Some of them really were out for a time. But imagine, look at the dependency just here in Texas on gas.
And shame on you, price gougers. I heard about you, Best Buy. That's not right. You know, did you hear about their water? Their water was like $50 for a case of water. When people are in a state of emergency, you never take advantage of them. And I like Best Buy, but they mark their water up to like $50 a case or something. When we're in a state of emergency and we're saying shout out to Houston and we love you, Houston, but buy this $50 water. While you're at it, get some headphones. A gas station's getting up to $9 an hour. We're in Texas, guys. We have an oil reserve. We're not out of gas. Yeah, and we should rely on our natural resources. The Native Americans did it a long time. The Africans did it. We do need to rely more on natural resources. But, you know, I would like to say that we need to start thinking outside of the box to be progressive. Marijuana is just one platform. It's an opening platform. It's new, and I think that's why a lot of us like Rob and I are gravitating to it, because it's new, and we like change. We're okay to change, and we want you to be okay with it as well.
And I mean, it's okay. Well, let me at least put this out as a disclaimer. It's okay if you don't support the use of cannabis. Just don't stand in anybody else's way.
Yeah, perfectly said. Well said. Well said. Well said.
With that, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
You're
watching Round Table.